Hello and welcome to our June 12th, 2026 Freshet Friday podcast. This week, the time has come to talk of many things, including Burnaby Mayor Mike Hurley's State of the City message, a water leak at a refinery in Burnaby, a new coach for the Coquitlam Express, a touching and inspiring story from Mario, and a special guest who will explain why cabers will soon be tossed in Coquitlam as part of our preview of the 129th British Columbia Highland Games. I'm your host, Geof Wheelwright, and with me on the podcast this week are the veteran journalists and founders of Freshet News, Janice Clue, Teresa McManus, Cornelia Naylor, and Mario Bartel, with their take on all of these happenings in Burnaby, New Westminster, and the Tri-Cities. Welcome back, team.
Hey, Jeff.
Hello, Jeff.
I'm going to start with a conversation I had earlier with Janice about Burnaby Mayor Mike Hurley's 8th annual State of the City address. So, Janice, what did the mayor have to say?
Sure, it was his 8th time delivering the State of the City address for Burnaby Board of Trade. It was sold out. There was more than 400 people there. It was just incredible. And the mayor stood up and spoke for about 15 minutes. He showed a video as well, but he checked off all his accomplishments over the past year since he had been there last. And the main one was the mayor's task force on Burnaby economic growth and resilience. This is a 15-member advisory panel, and they're going to be releasing their report quite shortly. It's a strategy on how Burnaby can do better economically. And it all aligns with their official community plan, which is called Burnaby 2050. And this was adopted last December. It talks about land use, of course. A lot of things have changed since then with the provincial government legislations. But the plan in Burnaby is to be economically viable and to be quite resilient in this very tough market. He did touch on the Burnaby Housing Authority, which was recently created. Council has now approved 2 housing complexes as a result. And he did focus on the almost $1 billion worth of capital projects which are underway in Burnaby. I'll just highlight them here. It's the Shadbolt Centre for the Arts. They're opening up a new theatre next year. The Cameron Community Centre, the Burnaby Lake Recreation Center, Brentwood Community Center, and the RCMP building, which is going up to 3 stories. And he did, of course, mention the new wildfire detection system on Burnaby Mountain. He is a 30-year firefighter, and this was quite close to his heart. So economic stability and community wellness are very much top of mind for him.
And what was the reception?
The reception was very good. Of course, he did acknowledge that nothing of this can be done alone. Nothing's in isolation. So he did single out council, and 2 of the councillors who are retiring, PHO Calandino and Sav Dhaliwal, they were present and they did get a standing ovation for their work. Burnaby Council will be looking a lot different quite soon with 3 councillors leaving, including Alison Gu. So times are changing in Burnaby, and it looks like the city is very well positioned economically.
And did he highlight any particular challenges that he sees ahead?
Mostly the provincial government. He did have a poke at them, because housing was going quite strong, and now it's at a bit of a pause right now because of the new legislation. What he did mention is how strong Burnaby is going into this next phase. He brought up a graphic showing the authorized municipal debt per person in the big cities in BC. Burnaby's at 0. They have no debt owing, as opposed to New Westminster, which is $2,000 per person, and Coquitlam is $672 per person. So financially, Burnaby is on solid ground.
I'm also wondering if he resisted the temptation to talk about Burnaby Hospital.
He did not talk about Burnaby Hospital. He did not talk about FIFA. He kept on his speech, and he mentioned how strong Burnaby is doing, especially in terms of life sciences and digital media, especially like electronic arts and the filming. And he did mention how Burnaby is well ahead of Vancouver in terms of filming.
All right. Well, thank you for that, Janice. Much appreciated. Now I want to turn to Cornelia for details on another big story in Burnaby, a sign of the times that saw Burnaby Council discuss a proposed bylaw that could soon bring relief to Brentwood residents who've been living with a bright LED sign flashing ads into their apartments for 5 months. What's going on?
Well, yes. At Tuesday night's council meeting, council passed first, second, and third reading of their new sign bylaw. This will replace, or would replace, with final adoption, the bylaw passed in 1972, which has been amended 25 times since then to introduce new sign types and modernize applications and review processes. Despite amendments, all these amendments, this current bylaw still has some shortcomings, according to staff, including that the amendments, all of those different amendments, have made it less clear, transparent, and accessible. So this new bylaw would be a total repeal and replacement of that bylaw. Some of those shortcomings include the fact that signs approved through the comprehensive signage plans that are approved with zoning, that the current bylaw doesn't cover those. Potential city-owned billboards are not covered. It seems to me like the city must be looking into creating big billboards, kind of like the ones that New West has at different entry points into the city that I've noticed. Sky signs are not included. Sky signs, these are signs on the top of major commercial buildings like hotels and some banks in tall buildings have them, and hotels. And the one that relates to Brentwood residents is that there's no laws right now, or no regulations in the current bylaw about the brightness of illuminated or digital signs. And of course, that made me think of those Brentwood residents that you were talking about. They are neighbors of 1 Gilmore Place, a big master plan development I think it's Low Heat Highway and Gilmore. And in January, they lit up that on the side of 1 Gilmore Place, a sign lit up that some neighbors have called, said shone with the strength of 1,000 suns, or whatever it was that their quote was. So complaints came piling in as soon as it was lit up in January. It was turned off after a night of being on and shining into people's windows. Then it was relit in March. Then apparently for about 2 months now, it's now been turned off after 11 p.m. So that sign would have been approved as part of the rezoning as a comprehensive signage plan in 2018. The problem, according to a neighbor, Martin Kendall, who's the strata president of a neighboring building, is that that sign was lit up before 2 of the buildings in that rezoning, in that plan, were built, which means that instead of it sort of shining in a plaza-y area, it's shining into neighbors' apartments. And as I've already said, the current bylaw doesn't have rules governing the brightness. So technically speaking, there's nothing the city can do. Of course, Ani, as we can see by some of the things they've done, they're trying to mitigate some of the impacts on neighbors. But so as I said, the bylaw is designed to deal with some of that. It would allow signs to be only marginally brighter than the ambient light, the light around, which means that they have to be equipped with ambient light sensors so that as the night gets darker, the sign will also dim so that there's not as much of a contrast. And another part of this bylaw is that inspectors are going to be empowered to be able to go on premises and inspect to make sure that there's compliance. So help is on the way.
Well, hopefully those Brentwood residents will get that relief soon. And now I want to talk to Teresa to get the scoop on why a New Westminster cannabis store has been given the green light to relocate from Queensborough to downtown. I'm a little hazy on the details here. Teresa, what's happening, and why do I feel hungry all of a sudden?
Yeah, this one is the latest update in the city's efforts to create cannabis stores in New Westminster. And the Queensborough Cannabis Company was actually the very first store that opened in New West after the federal government allowed this to happen. And but then a few months later, the BC government cannabis store opened up on a different part of Queensborough, over at Queensborough Landing. The owner of the Queensborough Cannabis Company, Ron Bazran, a New West man who lots of folks will probably have encountered through the years. He's the owner of that store and has put in an application to the city and to the province to relocate to the shops at New West Station. And essentially, in a letter to the city, he just said that they've had a significant drop in foot traffic and sales because of the government store, and it's just been increasingly difficult to operate at that location on Ewan Avenue. So now they want to go into the shops at New West Station, which is, for folks that aren't familiar with that name, it's where the New Westminster SkyTrain is. And there's a shop there in the corner, really close to the McKenna Street overpass, where they are hoping to locate. And in his letter to the city, Mr. Basran said that they intend to begin renovations at that location and relocate as soon as they get their rezoning approved. So there's a few more steps that have to go through on this. The city has given its support. The only person who did vote against that was Councillor Daniel Fontaine, and his thinking was that it's just not the type of business that the downtown needs right now. He said it's not the type of retail that we need to in the downtown, and there's a lot of other retail that he'd love to see, but this isn't one of them. Other councillors did say that it would probably bring some additional foot traffic to the mall area there. And alluding to what you said earlier, there are a lot of food restaurants around there, so it could be good for those businesses.
Ironically enough, I think there's been a cafe in that spot and two different restaurants, and they've all failed.
So, where does all this leave the cannabis store proposed for the downtown? When will they make a decision?
Well, council has given its approval, and it has to go to the province, and it has to make sure that they get the approval that way. And essentially, they'll come back and they'll get a business license and make sure that the city will ensure that the store in Queensborough has closed before the applicant can open up a new location in the downtown. And I will add there, I mentioned that Councillor Fontaine was voted against this. The city did actually survey people about this and on Be Heard New West, and there was 127 responses to that. And the city said that there was mixed feedback regarding that proposal. And I think, to his point, there were some concerns that people had expressed about the use of substances in the downtown, as well as some issues related to odors, other uses, proximity to other uses, loitering, and that sort of thing. We already do hear some of those concerns about the shops at New West for some of the folks that are gathering down there. So, but there's been, as one of the councillors put out, there's been no issues related to cannabis stores at all in New Westminster.
To be fair, the cannabis store on 12th Street is probably one of the nicest retail storefronts in the city in that part of the city.
Yes, it's beautiful looking. Yeah. And the one on 6th Street, there is another one. That's one of the things that is a little bit different about this is when the city was coming up with the process for dealing with cannabis store applications, it decided on having a single store in each of the commercial areas. So that would have been Sapperton, the Uptown, the Downtown, 12th Street, and Queensborough. This means that there will be two stores open in the downtown, but the one that's been open for several years now is over on 6th Street, and quite often lots of lineups outside that store. And so the council was comfortable with adding a second location in the downtown.
Thank you for clearing that up, Teresa. Now I want to switch to a very moving story that Mario wrote this week about a Coquitlam mom's daily journey and how it keeps her connected to her late son. Do you want to tell us about this, Mario?
Yeah, this is one of those stories that as a journalist, you kind of go in with, you can see that it's going to be a compelling story, but you also know it's going to be a very difficult story to tell. This is a story about Denise Leung. Her son was diagnosed 4 years ago with a fairly common form of childhood brain cancer. And he fought the good fight and lost it in January 2025. And since then, she's been doing daily journeys to his gravesite in the Riverside Memorial Cemetery or the Robinson Memorial Cemetery in central Coquitlam and up on near Blue Mountain. And sometimes she runs, sometimes she walks. She said sometimes when she doesn't have time, she'll just drop by on the car. And this is her way of staying connected to her son, who was 9 when he passed. And we found out about it because she was participating in the RBC Run for Kids, which raises money for Sick Kids Hospital, BC Children's Hospital. And they were trying to get the word out to help fundraising support in that. And that run took place last Sunday. And this is her second year participating with an extended family group. And it was a difficult interview. It's heart-wrenching to lose a child, but it's also very affirming when someone goes to that kind of length to maintain that connection. She said she still feels like a mom to him, and It's hard not to be moved when you're talking about that situation and imagining yourself. I mean, I have a 13-year-old son, and it's very difficult to think of having to go through that, and how heart wrenching that could be when you can't do anything about it. But she was very thankful for the care he did receive at BC Children's Hospital, so that's why she felt compelled to start participating in the annual run. And hopefully, getting stories like that. This is the time of year when a lot of these kind of events are going on, and it's often those personal connections that make them come alive. It gives meaning to 1,000 people or several thousand people getting together and doing a run and trying to fundraise. It's every one of those people probably carries a story or a connection in some way, and to be able to share one of those stories, it's a real privilege we have as journalists to be able to do that. But like I say, it's very difficult to.
Wow, Mario. Well, that is a truly touching and inspiring story, and thank you for that. I want to completely switch gears now and bring you our interview with Mike Chisholm, the Executive Director of Scotfest BC, to tell us all about what to expect at this year's event. I'd like to welcome a guest to the Freshet Friday podcast this week. We're lucky enough to have Mike Chisholm, the Executive Director of Scotfest BC. So welcome, Mike.
Thank you, Geoff. Glad to be here.
Yeah, so maybe we can start by just telling everybody who you are and what your job entails.
Well, I'm the executive director of the United Scottish Cultural Society. That is an organization composed of a number of Scottish organizations: Highland dancing, piping and drumming, Scottish country dancing, are organizations, all in Scottish, and they got together back in 1984. They created the United Scottish Cultural Society, and one of the main program of the USCS is Scotfest BC, the British Columbia Highland Games. And that's an event that has been taking place for 128 years in the Vancouver area. It started in 1897 with some local Scots who began what was called a Highland Games. Now, a games it's a competition originally among runners who would compete to see who was the fastest. And that was for the runners that would run between the various clan territories carrying messages, basically the iPhone of the of the day. And so we have a competition to see who was the top runner. And what would happen is the top runners would show up, and so would the top pipers and the top dancers and the strongest men. And they started competing in various other areas like Highland dancing, like Highland bagpiping, and the Scottish heavy events like caber tossing. And so that created a games. And that tradition has been going on, believe it or not, for 700 years. And was a partial inspiration for the modern Olympics, but it's also one that has been carried by Scots all over the world. And you can find Highland Games everywhere. Scotfest BC is one of the bigger ones. So my job is to deliver the games, to produce it. I'm the producer of the whole event. And I work with a great volunteer committee of 30 people, and we're able to deliver this program year after year. So that's my job.
That sounds like a fun and fascinating job.
There are times when I'd trade you any day, but but yes, overall, it's funny. One of the things that I wanted to accomplish in my life, I always thought I would like to run a Highland Games. Well, this will be my 10th one coming up. So we're ready to go. We could hold the games this weekend if we wanted to.
So, if it was this weekend, what would you be telling people about what to come? What should they look forward to in coming to Scotfest BC?
Well, first of all, it's easy to get to. If you're anywhere near the SkyTrain or you can access the SkyTrain, go to the Douglas Lafarge Lake Station. It's the very last one on the Millennium Line. And when you get out, we're easy to find. All you have to do is listen. Open up your ears and listen. We're right across the lake, and if you can't hear the bagpipes, you better get back on the train and head to a hearing doctor. So that's the first thing. It's easy to get to. And when you get there, for $30, you can get 5 Celtic bands, including 1 Juno Award winner. You'll get a dozen pipe bands, including 6-time former world champions, SFU pipe band. Highland dancing competitions. There's 5 cultural presentations, If you want to try the small pipes instead of the great Highland bagpipe, you can try a small pipe. There's a tent for that. That's new. We're going to have a special ceremony that commemorates the 100th anniversary of the Royal Canadian Legion, with the Centennial Legion Pipe Band, an honor guard, and that will be at 1 o'clock on Saturday. We're going to have, of course, the highlight of the event is always the mass bands at the end of the games, when all the pipers and drummers get together and march onto the field. That's a real highlight. We have British cars, we have free kids activities, Scottish experience. As a kid, you can try tossing a caber, playing a bagpipe, or some Highland dancing. We've got a program that can help you teach you that. One of the things that we have always done at our games is we've tried to introduce an international element. But we always invite an international group. Anyone who's been to our event will notice, has probably seen the mariachi band a few times, the Mexicans with the big hats and the guitars, and everybody loved them. This year, we're bringing in Titina Amaui Kapahaka. That's a Maori haka group from, I think it's North Vancouver. And we've invited them to come and give a haka to any New Zealanders who are in town for the Sunday World Cup match between New Zealand and Egypt. So there's no game on Saturday, so we might get some New Zealanders and we'll have a welcoming haka for them. So that's going to be one of the highlights of our event. So then we have artisans, food, vendors, and merchandise. And so that's why I think people would find it quite interesting.
Wow, that's just so much. So
There is
what advice would you have for a first timer, for somebody who's never been to Scotfest BC? What's your survival guide to get the most out of it?
You should see 5 things. Heavy events, the caber tossers. You want to watch that for a while. Go to the pipe band competitions and watch the various pipe bands, all of the pipe bands from this area competing, which is great. You get to see everybody from the lowest level bands to the highest, SFU. That's 2. Go watch some Highland dancing on the Highland dancing stage. That's fantastic. Go see the Barra McNeils. They're going to play twice at 3:15 and 6:15. They'll be live on the stage under the big tent. And of course, we stop everything at 5 o'clock so everyone can go watch mass bands. So those are the 5 highlights for anyone.
That sounds like a full day.
It is. The biggest compliment I get is people say, I did not get to see everything.
Well, and I know this has got a real kind of all ages appeal to it. So maybe you could talk a little bit about what's there for some of those ages, like kids, for example.
Well, we have a free kids program. One of the things I discovered was parents need a break. So we create a children's area where you can't drop your kids off or anything, but you can go buy a coffee, sit and talk to some other parents, and we'll entertain the kids for a while. We have a bouncy castle for the little ones, face painting and balloon twisting. All of this is free. So you can just come there and hang out with your kids and get to try lots of different stuff. All the solo piping, a lot of the solo drumming and Highland dance, that's all kids. And so other kids can come and see that other kids are doing and competing and are involved. And that's a chance for them to see everyone else doing what maybe they want to do, or maybe they'll ask their parents that they want to do it.
That's great. Now, what about the older kids and the kind of toys they want to play with?
We have British cars. We have, I think we'll have 30 this year. We have our cultural workshop tent. So we have a tent that's providing 5 different presentations on various areas of Scottish culture, both old and new. We have somebody talking about the Great Highland. And following that, we're going to take another 45 minutes to show off some of the heroes of the past Highland Games. We've been around 128 years, so we've had some fantastic athletes and individuals who were involved. Well, we're going to get to know a little bit about them from Neil McLean, the historian for the St. Andrews and Caledonian Society. And then we have 2 archivists from the Vancouver archives to talk about the amount of Scottish material is in the Vancouver archives, because there was a huge Scottish community here back 100 years ago. And of course, there's the whiskey school, but you might want to get your tickets early, and you get to taste 5 different whiskeys from 5 different areas. We have 4 classes on Saturday afternoon. So anyway, lots for adults to do, believe me.
So, my final question for you, Mike, is what are you most excited about in this year's event?
I think I'm excited that our chieftain of the day. And remember, I explained about how Highland Games began. When the clans got together, they all came with their own chief. Not everybody can be the chief, so they have to pick one. So they picked one amongst themselves, and they called that person the chieftain of the day. And that tradition has continued on through the centuries. And every year we've appointed a chieftain of the day from among our community or from among our supporters. And this year we decided to honor someone who has been a supporter of our games for the past 18 years in Coquitlam, and that's Mayor Richard Stewart. So we have invited him, and he's accepted the invitation to be our 129th British Columbia Highland Games Chieftain of the Day.
That sounds very cool. Now, is he going to toss the caber?
Aha! I think he should.
All right. Well, we'll leave that as a challenge. And thank you so much for this, Mike.
And tickets still on sale. gotfestbc.com. Easy peasy. And then come on down to the games and come say hello to me. I'll be the guy in the kilt.
Thank you again, Mike. Well, that was fantastic. That was Mike Chisholm, Executive Director of Scotfest BC, the British Columbia Highland Games. And a reminder, that's taking place Friday, June 19th and Saturday, June 20th. The pipes will be calling me on that day, I can assure you. Well, there's definitely a lot happening at the Highland Games. Another place that seems to have a lot happening in the off-season is our own BC Hockey League team, where Mark Coletta is taking up the reins as coach. And Mario is here to tell us all about it. Take it away, Mario.
Yeah, the Express let go Geof Wagner at the end of last season. The team has had some good regular season success, but haven't been able to translate that into much of a playoff run for several years now. They seem to not get past the first round. And so Geof Wagner was released from his obligations to the team, and a search began for a new head coach. And according to Tally Campbell, no sooner did they make public that Wagner was gone, and his phone started exploding with text messages from prospective coaches. He said last Thursday at the little press conference they had to announce Coletta's hiring that he got like 190 expressions of interest for the job. They narrowed that down pretty quickly to several that had serious potential. They said they came from all over across North America, even Europe. Some coaches reached out, and they got down pretty quick to the final two. The other candidate apparently came out from Ontario and was quite well regarded. Mark Collette is a local guy. He's from Burnaby. He grew up in Burnaby, and he played a little bit of junior hockey. He spent one season as an assistant coach with the Surrey Eagles in the BCHL, so he's not completely unfamiliar with the league. But that was several years ago because he's spent the last 17 years up at SFU leading that hockey program, which also had its demise this spring. He was the coach that sort of brought that program to fruition. It's a club program up there. It's not a varsity program, so they got very minimal support from the school. The players pretty much had to pay their own way on top of their academic costs. There was no scholarships available to them. And that program branched out into two streams a few years ago. A competitive stream that played against local colleges and universities that were part of the BC Intercollegiate Hockey League, and a sort of barnstorming team that would go across North America playing big-time NCAA teams like Michigan and Boston U that some people may recognize from the sportscast when the big Frozen Four happens. And a lot of those players on that team were former junior players who were just looking to continue their career in some kind of competitive environment because their junior time had run out. They were also getting an education and think about life past hockey. So yeah, he comes with some good experience. It'll be interesting to see how that translates to a full-time gig in the BC Hockey League. The one thing that Tally Campbell, the general manager, talked about when he let Geof Wagner go was the culture in the team was lacking. Anyone who listens to Vancouver sports radio know that's been a big talking point this offseason about the Vancouver Canucks and the moves they've made, and they're also looking to improve their culture. And a lot of that comes down to just having a positive attitude, taking their role as hockey players seriously, showing up on time for things, and doing what's necessary to become good hockey players and good citizens in the community, getting out into the community and that. And it seems like those kind of things we're hearing about the Vancouver Canucks are also the kind of things that we can expect Coletta to implement in the BC and with the Coquitlam Express. So, and Tally Campbell's a big believer in that too. He's often said, they're not just creating hockey players; they're creating young men that they want to have. Give them the tools to, if their hockey doesn't amount to much for them, they can at least have the tools to be upstanding citizens in their communities and know how to give back and take the privilege they've had through their youth of playing the sport at a high level and traveling around to take that into adulthood.
Well, sounds like the team will be one to watch when the season starts again.
Yeah, he's an interesting character. He likes to throw around the F-bombs. He should make for some good interviews, and he's a pretty feisty guy. This first time I met him. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the team formulates around that.
A colorful season ahead, it sounds like. Well, I'm going to switch gears again, and this time we're going to talk about our Freshet 911 stories for the week, interactions with emergency services, emergencies, and potential emergencies. And the first one of these comes from Cornelia, where you're going to talk about how a Burnaby refinery tackled a contaminated water leak.
Yeah, so the Burnaby refinery, once Parkland refinery, now owned by Sunoco, on Monday put out a series of advisories saying that they were dealing with a late night leak of what they called process water from a tank at the facility. I didn't know what process water was, so I had to do some looking up. And apparently it's water used in the refining of crude oil, and it absorbs various contaminants during the process. We know that the water that leaked on Monday contained toxic hydrogen sulfide, and people were advised to stay away from Confederation Park in North Burnaby, which is quite close to the refinery. Firefighters were in the area setting up air monitors along Penzance Drive near there. The refinery said that it had called in the fire department at about 3:30 a.m. in the wee hours as part of its normal response procedures. Then at about 2:20 p.m. Monday, they put out another advisory saying the leak had, quote, stabilized significantly and is now contained. I'm not entirely sure what that means, but they say it was contained. Throughout the refinery called the leak a small leak. And that's what we have there. This is the second sort of notable incident in the last couple of years. I know that in January 2024, there was a massive release of like sort of a dark, very foul-smelling odor coming from the refinery that had to do with, what did it have to do with? Fluid catalytic cracker unit. Sounds all interesting stuff that you learn when you're talking about the refinery. Yeah, so that triggered a bunch of odor complaints. That's the last time I heard about any significant event there.
Wow. Well, I'm glad they got it handled anyway. The next story we have is for Mario, and I understand you have some news about body cameras starting to be used by police in Port Moody.
Yeah, Port Moody Police sent out a press release announcing that they were about to equip some of its officers with cameras that they wear on themselves to record interactions with during incidents. They've been talking about this for a couple years. It first came up as part of their strategic plan in 2024, 2025. And they said at the time it would cost $120,000 for the equipment, and they also wanted to fund a new IT position to help bolster their own internet security, electronic security, as well as deal with some of the other things that come along with these cameras. Of course, all the footage has to be archived in case it's used in court, and it has to be stored in such a way that can be easily accessed. So it has to be searchable. So they need someone to do that. So they finally got, I think it was this past budget, they finally got the ability to do that. So now the cameras are coming in. They said in the news release that all the officers that are out on the road will have the cameras by the end of this year. But they're starting to implement it, and that'll make them one of the leaders in the Lower Mainland, I believe. From looking around. So yeah, if you're going to be causing a ruckus in Port Moody prepared to be captured on camera, and um, for better or for worse, I guess.
Yeah, and equally, if you get an interaction with police in Port Moody, at least you know that there will be a camera there to actually record what's going on.
Yeah, that's the idea. I mean, it does keep the police a little more accountable, I suppose. That the onus is on them to turn on the device when they get to an incident. They won't be on during just driving around in the car or walking around on the
Right.
beat. But once they have an interaction, they're being instructed to turn them on. Um, and yeah, they do have discretion to not turn them on in sensitive areas such as churches or healthcare facilities, things like that. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it rolls out and what kind of response there is in the community. And as we've seen in other parts of the world where these things happen, they can be a useful tool. They can also be something that can cause a bit of a flashpoint if the police aren't properly trained in their use and something happens, and then oh dear, they forgot to turn the camera on.
Yeah.
So yeah,
That's
it'll be interesting to
so
see how this plays out.
that can be a real thing. I remember covering a court case where there was a high profile arrest of somebody suspected of um, murder, and it was an inexperienced officer, and they don't and it's Burnaby RCMP. They didn't have body worn cameras at the time, but they do have audio recording equipment, and he forgot to turn his on because it was such a there was a car crash right at the time that they were supposed to jump out of the vehicle and arrest this high profile suspect, and he just, I think, legitimately forgot. Yeah.
Well,
Anyway, it can happen. I mean, those are high stress situations. So it's interesting that they put that responsibility on the officer, but I don't know how else you would get around that,
and it makes me
because
wonder too. Like we've seen this roll out more and more, and it kind of goes in counter to the smaller prevalence of media. Because back in the day
uh,
when we were able to monitor police scanners and go to scenes, I mean that was part of what we would tell ourselves, that we're kind of there to keep emergency services in line. That if the media is at something, they'll be less inclined to beat someone about the head or something like that. And back in the 90s and the 80s, if you heard of something going down, you would book it over there and get out the camera and stand where you were allowed to stand, or even before they put up tape where you could go, you know, take photos. And you would like to think that that kept a certain level of accountability. But now with the media core everywhere so depleted, and police scanners now on digital systems that are very difficult or very expensive to monitor, that very seldom happens that there's media present when something goes down, like as we saw when things were going crazy with the ICE arrests in the States. A lot of it was happenstance. I think the Minnesota incident was captured by a New York Times photographer or a wire service probably just happened to be nearby and heard the commotion and got over there just in time to see and record what happened. So there was footage. We don't know how that would have played out had there been nobody there, and would they have been able to hide that or not be held to account? So yeah, it is a level of accountability, but it's also a level of accountability that like you say, Cornelia, it's controlled by the police themselves. So there are, you have to be very careful that there are opportunities there to uh, take advantage of that. And yeah, oh, I forgot to turn the camera on after a suspect turns up in jail with bruises and contusions from getting beat up.
Yeah, well, there's also the smartphones everywhere, and so lots of people are recording these kinds of interactions quite independently of the police. People don't have to deliberately have a camera with them, and they will have some sort of record. But talking about police scanners and the things that you hear from police, and then I guess most of these days it's press releases and social media where police are talking about what they're doing. But Teresa, I know you have a story out of New West that you wanted to talk about this week.
Yeah, the New West Police sent out a news release regarding an incident that had occurred on March 21st. And so at that point in time, there was someone in New West who saw a man who they felt was acting inappropriately with what they described as a female youth. No age was given. And the person called the police. And by the time that they had arrived on the scene, the man and the young woman, female, had left. So the witness did get the license plate. Police did investigate, and they found the man, who at that time was not with the woman. An investigation ensued, And the police have since just announced that they got a search warrant for the man's home, at which time they located an SKS rifle, whatever that might be, a shotgun, a semi-automatic rifle, ammunition, replica firearms, holsters, and 3D printed firearm parts, as well as some other prohibited devices. And apparently this investigation all relates to a sexual exploitation, which the police say is very concerning. And they said that they're thankful to the concerned citizen who called them and allowed them to uncover not only a multitude of weapons, but also to remove a vulnerable female from a dangerous situation. So a New Westminster man has been charged with sexual exploitation as well as numerous weapons charges. So pretty scary.
Yeah.
But, and again, as the police have done before, this is just an example of why folks should call police when they think something just seems out of place, because all this was by all indications was someone that they just kind of thought looked a little weird with a girl. So
Huh.
and based on what they've said, the discovery of these weapons was not expected as part of a sexual investigation.
Wow. Well, thank you for that, Teresa. That's amazing. And now we're going to turn to Janice to talk about what's on this week. So, Janice, what's happening?
There's lots going on in our area. Every day seems to be a little bit more leading into the summer. I did want to mention a art reception that is happening Friday night. It's the artist named Marika Morissette. She's got her first solo show happening at the Deer Lake Art Gallery in Burnaby. The reception starts at 6:30 on Friday night. And I did speak with her. She used to be the executive assistant of the president of the Capilano College, Capu, they call it now. And she's created this series of 30 paintings, and they're all like a fluid art, so it's acrylic pour. And she puts some silicone oil in it, and it creates like the cell patterns, and it's just lovely art. It's very fluid, very lively art, and she wants to do this for a living. So this was very exciting for her to come out and have her first solo show. I do want to mention all the farmers markets that are now happening in Burnaby, New Westminster, and the Tri-Cities, as well as all the lacrosse action, the Salmon Bellies, the Coquitlam Adanacs, as well as the Burnaby Lakers. So if you're ever bored, go catch one of the games. And of course, it is FIFA time. We have got Canada playing Bosnia-Herzegovina, and that is going to have a lot of watch parties happening around in our area. There's a big one in New Westminster at Queen's Park, as well as in Coquitlam at the Town Centre Park. And if you haven't got enough soccer, on Sunday, the Vancouver Rise are going to be playing at Swangard Stadium, and they are facing Ottawa for a 2:00 game.
That's wonderful. And it's completely FIFA free, that one.
It is.
That's great. Thank you so much for that, Janice. And now we're going to get to our favorite stories of the week. Who wants to go first?
I can go first. I'd have to say the story that touched me the most was Mario's, the one that he talked about earlier, about Denise Leung, and that's in our paper that was published yesterday. The idea of losing a child is unthinkable, but it happens to people, and they have to respond in some way, and to think that and to be witness to this woman who has gotten up, walked, run, and is now helping other people. It's very inspiring. It's both inspiring and touching. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well told story, but yeah, a very powerful one.
Yeah. Thank you again, Mario.
I'm a Gemini, so I have a very, very hard time making decisions about. So Mario's was one of my favorites. Absolutely, it may have made me cry, but just listening to that mom's story and was very inspiring. Um, two other stories this week that I would consider my favorites. One of them was just a photo, and I was at City Hall a while back, and I was chatting at the desk there with a fellow that a lot of New Westies will know, Walt Cirillo. He works in their business licensing area, and longtime New West resident mentioned his wife was going to Croatia on a bike trip. And I said, "Oh, you should get her to take a copy of the Freshet with her and take a photo." And he did. Sylvia Cirillo and a whole group of folks, there's almost 20 of them, who did this amazing bike ride through Croatia, which just looked stunning. I'm not a bike rider, but Mario would have liked it. And they did. They took a lovely photo of them with the copy of the Freshet. And we used to do this when I worked at the Record newspaper, and I always got such a kick out of seeing where people were going. So I would highly encourage anybody who's planning some kind of vacation to take a copy of their Freshet along and send us the photo. When I did work at the Record, the furthest that my family went was the Birch Bay water slides. But that photo of my kids and all their cousins at the water slides is still on my fridge. And then the other thing that the other story that I wanted to mention was the story about Elmer Rudolph, New Westminster resident who passed away quite suddenly on May 30th. A big loss to the community, both to the environmental community, the stream keepers in Burnaby and New Westminster. I mean, decades and decades of work that he put into reviving streams and releasing fish and working with kids to just help clean up these waterways. And then also my dealings with Elmer were more at the civic level. The West End Residents Association, he was probably, I'm guessing, the longest serving Residents Association president in New Westminster's history. He would go to council and he would advocate very politely, on a wide variety of issues, whether it was traffic calming or the need for, I think, any number of things in his community. But he always did it in such a way that it was respectful. And no matter which side of the political spectrum you were on, he was fair. And such a big loss. I know that at Monday's council meeting, it's not often that every councillor will talk about the passing of someone, but that's what happened this week. Everyone was acknowledging that. And I know that when I first wrote about this, I did talk to Mayor Patrick Johnstone, and he spoke so highly of Elmer. He said that he was really an inspiration both to the people who do shoreline cleanup programs, but also fights against TMX, because that was something that they feared was going to have a real impact on the Burnett watershed. And but as Patrick Johnstone said, we could all aspire to leave a legacy of that scale for future generations. So he really touched a lot of lives.
Wow. Thank you for that, Teresa. How about you, Mario?
Yeah, to pick up on that, Teresa, I was saddened to read your story about Elmer's passing. He's been kind of a constant presence in my whole time out here. We crossed paths a number of times on stories, and whether it was fighting for better sidewalks in the West End or some issue out there, or down at the Brunette River. I remember once taking a canoe ride with him. We paddled up and down the Brunette River right near its mouth on the Fraser, and he was talking about all the work that had gone into bringing that river back so that fly fishermen could go down there and catch salmon. And I often ride my bike along the Central Valley Greenway past there, and it's one of the most lovely spots anywhere, where it's just so peaceful, and the light dapples through the trees, and the river flowing next to the path, and it's just a highlight of any ride, whether you're heading out for a long ride or coming back from a long ride. That gravel trail along. I always think of Elmer when we're riding along there, and that canoe ride I took with him, because it also generated one of my most favorite photos that we ran on the front page of the Burnaby News Leader many years ago. So yeah, he was just like you say, he was one of those steady guys who went about his advocacy work quietly, didn't grandstand a lot, didn't ask for a lot of attention, but he was dedicated to his cause, and whether he'd help fish get over the weir at the Caribou Dam, and he was so proud of how that river had come back from its dismal state, I guess, many years ago. And that's something to be like. That is a great legacy, and I hope anyone who goes down there, I hope people do go down to that trail and can appreciate the work that Elmer and other people who work with him have done to make that such a lovely, pleasant spot.
Yeah, as you say, that is quite a legacy. Thank you for that. So, Janice, I'm going to turn to you. You have a very different favorite story of the week, one that involves a bear rubble video.
This isn't so much of a story as it is a video that I captured on Monday night. This is a video that I put on our social media feeds, Instagram and Facebook and Blue Sky. And it's just a reminder that the bears are out. We saw 2 bears by the Coquitlam River. They came out. We're pretty sure their mother was watching them from the bush. But these 2 came out and they started grazing. And there was a lot of passerbys that were staying far away from the area. There are a lot of bear aware information sessions happening in the Tri-Cities. The next one's coming up is on June 17th in Port Coquitlam. That does require registration, but it is good to know that we are living in bear country in the Tri-Cities, and to make sure that you lock your trash up. Otherwise, a fed bear is a dead bear, as they call it out here. So it's a $500 fine if you've got your trash out, if you've got your bird feeders out, if you're not collecting your fruit from your trees, because we want to make sure that these animals continue to survive in our area. And if you actually actively feed them, it's a provincial fine of $575. So yeah, the bears are out, they're wandering around, and just keep your distance.
Yeah, and I saw it in your video. These were very young bears.
They were, and we're pretty sure the mom was watching from a distance. But they did wander off. They were grazing on grass, and they were, checking out what was happening in the residential areas. And it is right there. They're there, and they're exploring. They're hungry, and we have to do all that we can to make sure that they continue to survive.
Oh, that is wonderful. Very inspiring. Thank you. And good advice, Janice. Really appreciate it.
Yeah.
My favorite story this week is a story about Expo 86. I remember Expo 86 as well, and have a very short story about that. I was actually a young reporter covering Expo 86, and I was living in the UK at that time, and I used to write a lot of stuff for the Times of London newspaper. So I got my editor that I wrote for the Times to give me a letter to get me media access at Expo 86. So I went to the media center and I handed them this letter, and they said, "Well, you're not British. You don't sound British." And they refused me. And I was really, I was just like, what? So I went out of the building. I walked around for, like 20 minutes or something. And then I kept an eye on the press center. And then there was somebody different at the desk. And I came in and said, "Hello, my name is Geof Wheelwright." And I put on this dumb British accent for, and as I was doing this, I thought, okay, well, I got my press pass and that's all I need to do. And then somebody comes up behind me and says, "Oh, hi, my name is Terry David Mulligan, and I'd really like to tell you about our city." And I was like, okay. So I had to keep up this British accent talking to Terry David Mulligan for, the next 15 minutes and pretending that. Anyway, it was very, very dumb. But that was one of my abiding memories of Expo. Mario. Well, that wraps up another Freshet Friday podcast, but we'll be back soon. In the meantime, keep asking yourself the question, is it Freshet Friday yet? And come on back when the answer is yes. Thanks to our team for being here. Thanks for listening, and have a great weekend.